Circumstances do not make the man, they reveal him to himself. James Allen. There is a truth hidden inside those words that most people spend their entire lives overlooking. They believe that change requires years, that transformation demands impossible effort, and that greatness belongs only to a chosen few. Yet, what if I told you that your entire life can begin to shift in just 5 seconds? Not because 5 seconds are magical, but because 5 seconds are enough to interrupt an old identity and choose a new one. 5 seconds are enough to stop worshipping fear and start honoring possibility. 5 seconds are enough to remember who you truly are. You have been taught to think that change is something outside of you, something that arrives after the perfect conditions appear. You have been conditioned to wait. Wait until the money comes. Wait until confidence appears. Wait until other people approve. Wait until you feel ready. But life has been whispering something entirely different to you. Life has been asking you to stop waiting and start deciding. Because every reality you have ever experienced first began as a decision inside consciousness. Before anything became visible, it was invisible. Before every accomplishment, there was a thought. Before every transformation, there was a moment when someone stopped identifying with weakness and started identifying with possibility. And that moment does not require an hour. It does not require a week. It requires a decision. 5 seconds, that is all. Think about how quickly fear enters your mind. It doesn't ask permission. In a moment, you imagine failure. In a moment, you remember rejection. In a moment, you convince yourself that something terrible will happen. If negativity can enter in an instant, then why do you believe that hope must arrive slowly? Why do you assume that confidence needs years to develop? The truth is, the old self survives because you keep giving it attention. Every day you revisit memories that no longer deserve your loyalty. Every day you rehearse limitations until they become familiar. You have become faithful to fears that have never been faithful to you. But there is something within you that has remained untouched by disappointment. There is a deeper awareness, a silent observer behind all your experiences. It has watched every success and every failure. It has seen every heartbreak and every victory. And despite everything, it has never been broken. It has never been damaged. It has simply been waiting for you to remember that you are more than the story you have been repeating. Imagine standing before a mirror and realizing that for years you have been describing yourself by your circumstances instead of your essence. You say, I am struggling. You say, I am unlucky. You say, I am behind. Yet those are experiences, they are not identity. Clouds move across the sky, but the sky itself remains unchanged. Experiences come and go, but the awareness experiencing them remains whole. And so, the next time fear appears, do not wrestle with it for hours. Do not spend the entire day trying to fix every thought. Instead, pause. Give yourself 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, remember who is in command. In those 5 seconds, ask yourself, what version of me would I choose to be if I were not afraid? You see, the greatest battles are not won through force. They are won through identification. Become identified with peace, and chaos loses its authority. Become identified with abundance, and lack begins to loosen its grip. Become identified with strength, and weakness becomes only a passing visitor rather than a permanent resident. Most people think manifestation begins with getting something. But it does not. It begins with becoming someone. It begins when your inner world stops asking permission from outer circumstances. It begins when you stop consulting appearances and start consulting your highest vision. That is why some people experience miracles while others remain trapped in endless cycles. One person continues to worship visible conditions, while another quietly decides that their imagination, their faith, and their inner conviction are more real than temporary appearances. One person reacts, another creates, and perhaps this is why so many individuals remain exhausted. They are trying to control every external event, while neglecting the one thing they actually possess authority over. They spend years attempting to rearrange the world, without realizing that the world they experience reflects the world they consistently entertain within themselves. Do not misunderstand this. This is not about pretending difficulties do not exist. It is about refusing to let difficulties define who you are. Storms are real, but storms do not become your identity. Delays are real, but delays are not destiny. Challenges are real, but they are not your final chapter. In fact, some of the greatest transformations happen when everything seems impossible. Because when external support disappears, something greater begins to awaken. You stop relying on appearances and begin relying on consciousness itself. You begin discovering that faith is not the absence of uncertainty. Faith is choosing your vision despite uncertainty. And perhaps there have been moments in your life when you felt something extraordinary inside you. A quiet knowing, a sense that you were created for more. Yet immediately doubt arrived, logic arrived, memories arrived, the voices of the past arrived, and little by little, you abandoned the vision and returned to familiar limitations. But what if you no longer obeyed those voices? What if, in just 5 seconds, you interrupted the old pattern? What if those 5 seconds became the doorway between the person you have been and the person you are becoming? Because something remarkable happens when a human being stops asking, "What if it doesn't work?" and begins asking, "What if everything changes because I finally changed?" And that question leads us to something even deeper. Something most people never understand until they awaken to the hidden power behind their assumptions. A power that quietly shapes every experience long before it becomes visible to the eyes. Circumstances do not make the man, they reveal him to himself. James Allen. Those hidden assumptions are far more powerful than most people realize. Long before events appear in your physical world, they are first entertained in the privacy of your consciousness. Life has an unusual way of mirroring what you repeatedly accept as true. Not what you occasionally wish for, not what you desperately beg for, but what you quietly identify with day after day. This is why two people can stand in the same situation and experience completely different realities. One sees obstacles and concludes that life is against them. The other sees temporary conditions and refuses to give them permanent meaning. Outwardly, their circumstances may look identical, but inwardly they are living in different worlds. And eventually, those inner worlds begin expressing themselves outwardly. Perhaps this explains why you have experienced moments when something wonderful entered your life unexpectedly. You called it luck. You called it coincidence. But maybe it was something else. Maybe for a brief moment you stopped resisting. Maybe for a brief moment you believed. Maybe without realizing it, you allowed yourself to feel worthy of receiving what had always been available. You see, life responds differently when you stop approaching it from desperation. Desperation sends a message that says, "I am incomplete. I am missing something. I need circumstances to rescue me." But consciousness does not respond to need in the same way it responds to identity. When you become internally convinced that you are already becoming the person you desire to be, something changes within you. You no longer chase. You no longer beg. You no longer panic. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, think differently, and people notice it. Not because you are pretending, not because you have mastered every fear, but because something deeper has shifted. There is a calmness that comes when you stop measuring your future by your past. There is a confidence that emerges when you stop consulting memories and start consulting possibilities. Many people spend years trying to remove negative thoughts, and in doing so, they become exhausted. They fight themselves endlessly. But the mind was never meant to be conquered through war. It was meant to be directed through attention. Whatever you feed grows stronger. Whatever you starve begins to lose its influence. Imagine sitting beside a fire. If you continue adding wood, the flames remain alive. But remove the fuel, and eventually the fire fades. Fear works the same way. Doubt survives because it receives your attention. Worry survives because you keep revisiting it. Old stories survive because you continue introducing yourself to them. But what if you stopped? What if, instead of spending hours arguing with fear, you simply gave yourself 5 seconds and chose another direction? 5 seconds to remember abundance. 5 seconds to remember health. 5 seconds to remember peace. 5 seconds to remember the person you are becoming. Some people underestimate the power of these moments because they are looking for dramatic signs. They expect lightning. They expect instant miracles. They expect life to suddenly announce that everything has changed. Yet nature itself teaches us differently. The seed does not scream when it begins to grow. Dawn does not arrive with violence. The ocean does not rush to prove its strength. The most powerful forces are often silent. Transformation begins quietly. Invisible roots form before visible fruit appears. This is why impatience destroys so many dreams. People plant seeds and dig them up every day to check whether they are growing. They become prisoners of appearances. They decide too quickly that nothing is happening. They abandon their vision because the evidence has not yet arrived. But the wise soul understands something extraordinary. Reality has seasons. Every harvest has an unseen period. The roots always come before the branches. And just because something is invisible does not mean it is absent. Think about your own life. How many times have things changed suddenly after long periods of uncertainty? How many times did opportunities appear when you least expected them? How many answers arrived after you had almost given up? Perhaps what seemed like sudden breakthroughs were actually invisible processes unfolding all along. And perhaps right now, even as you listen to these words, there are things moving into place that your physical eyes cannot yet perceive. But the old self becomes impatient. The old self wants guarantees. It wants proof before faith. It wants certainty before commitment. Yet life asks for something deeper. It asks for trust, not blind trust, not foolish optimism, but trust in the understanding that your inner state matters. Trust that who you repeatedly become is more important than what you temporarily experience. Trust that peace is more powerful than panic. Trust that faith can see beyond appearances. Because your imagination is not given to you merely for entertainment. It is a sacred instrument. It allows you to mentally inhabit possibilities before they become physical experiences. It enables you to step beyond current limitations and become familiar with a higher reality before it appears. Most people use imagination against themselves. They imagine disasters. They rehearse rejection. They rely painful memories. And then they wonder why they feel trapped. Yet imagination does not distinguish between what is remembered and what is anticipated. It simply responds to what is consistently impressed upon it. So ask yourself a profound question. If your mind insists on imagining something, why not imagine peace? If your heart insists on expecting something, why not expect blessings? If your consciousness must dwell somewhere, why not dwell in the possibility that life can surprise you in beautiful ways? Because what you repeatedly return to becomes your dwelling place, and your dwelling place eventually becomes your experience. That is why those 5 seconds matter more than they appear. In 5 seconds, you interrupt a lifetime of habit. In 5 seconds, you choose what version of reality deserves your attention. In 5 seconds, you remember that you are not powerless. You are not abandoned. You are not trapped by yesterday. And once you begin to understand this, another question naturally emerges, one that changes everything. If assumptions shape experiences, then who have you been assuming yourself to be all these years? And what incredible possibilities become available when you finally dare to assume something entirely different? Circumstances do not make the man, they reveal him to himself. James Allen. And that question deserves your deepest attention, because the answer to it has been quietly shaping your life for far longer than you realize. Who have you been assuming yourself to be? Not who you hope to become someday, not who others say you are, but who have you truly accepted yourself to be when no one is watching? Because the identity you carry in silence eventually speaks through every area of your life. Many people unknowingly carry invisible labels. They may never say them aloud, but deep within, they have accepted ideas such as, I am always overlooked. I never get what I want. Nothing works for me. Life is difficult. I am not enough. And because these assumptions feel familiar, they stop questioning them. They begin treating them as facts instead of habits. But what if those labels were never the truth? What if they were only conclusions formed from past experiences? And what if experiences were never meant to define you, but only to teach you? A child falls while learning to walk, yet no one concludes that the child is destined to crawl forever. Failure is not identity. Delay is not identity. Temporary pain is not identity. They are moments, they are events, they are chapters. But they are not the author of your story. The author is the consciousness that chooses what meaning to assign to every experience. This is why two people can suffer disappointment, and one becomes bitter while the other becomes wiser. One allows pain to become identity. The other allows pain to become transformation. One says, "Life has defeated me." The other says, "Life has prepared me." And perhaps you have spent too much time asking, "Why did this happen to me?" When a more powerful question would be, "Who am I choosing to become because of this?" Because life is not only happening around you, it is happening through you. Every challenge carries within it the opportunity to awaken something greater. Not because suffering itself is sacred, but because consciousness has the remarkable ability to create meaning where others see only loss. Think about the strongest people you admire. They were not born fearless. They were not handed perfect circumstances. They encountered darkness. They faced uncertainty. They stood in moments when nothing made sense. Yet, somewhere within them, they decided that their conditions would not determine their identity. And that decision changed everything. Not overnight. Not because the world suddenly became easy, but because they stopped consulting appearances for permission to believe in themselves. There is a freedom that enters your life when you stop demanding immediate evidence. There is a peace that arrives when you no longer make your emotional state dependent upon circumstances. You begin understanding that peace is not something the world gives you. Peace is something you practice. Strength is something you cultivate. Faith is something you choose. And that choice can happen in 5 seconds. Just 5 seconds. 5 seconds to refuse fear. 5 seconds to remember abundance. 5 seconds to return to gratitude. 5 seconds to ask yourself, if I truly trusted life, how would I think right now? How would I speak? How would I walk? How would I treat myself? Because transformation is not found in grand gestures. It is found in repeated moments, small moments, sacred moments, invisible moments that no one applauds. Moments when you choose dignity over despair. Moments when you choose vision over limitation. Moments when you refuse to surrender your inner authority to external appearances. And the beautiful thing is that no one can take those moments from you. The world may delay opportunities. People may misunderstand you. Circumstances may shift unexpectedly. But no one can prevent you from choosing what occupies your consciousness. No one can stop you from imagining something better. No one can imprison a mind that has learned to dwell in possibility. Perhaps that is why some people shine even during difficult seasons. They have discovered a secret that cannot be purchased. They understand that their greatest power does not lie in controlling every event. It lies in controlling what they consistently return to within themselves. Because where attention goes, life follows. And if your attention has been devoted to fear, fear becomes familiar. If your attention has been devoted to lack, lack becomes natural. But when attention begins dwelling upon peace, gratitude, love, and possibility, something extraordinary starts happening. Not only do you feel different, you become different. Your words change, your decisions change, your energy changes, and eventually, your experiences begin reflecting what you have become. This is why rushing is unnecessary. You are not trying to force reality. You are cultivating identity. You are planting seeds. You are becoming inwardly familiar with the life you desire before your physical senses confirm it. And that is where patience becomes powerful. Because patience is not waiting with anxiety. Patience is resting with confidence. It is knowing that what is planted faithfully will reveal itself in the proper season. It is understanding that unseen progress is still progress. It is trusting that even when nothing appears to be changing, something deeper may already be unfolding. And maybe this is the season you are in right now. Maybe you have been expecting dramatic signs while life has been quietly changing you from within. Maybe answers have been growing beneath the surface. Maybe opportunities are closer than they appear. Maybe the version of yourself you have been seeking is already beginning to awaken. And if that is true, then there is something even more profound waiting to be understood. Because beyond changing thoughts, beyond changing habits, beyond changing circumstances, there exists a deeper mystery about who you truly are. A truth so simple and so powerful that once you recognize it, you will never see yourself or your world in the same way again. Circumstances do not make the man, they reveal him to himself. James Allen. And perhaps that deeper mystery has been waiting for you all along. Not hidden in some distant place, not reserved for a select few, but quietly present beneath every experience you have ever had. Because beyond your memories, beyond your fears, beyond your successes and disappointments, there is something within you that has remained unchanged. There is an awareness that has witnessed every season of your life. It has watched dreams come and go. It has seen people enter and leave. It has observed moments of joy and moments of pain. And through it all, that awareness has never lost its ability to choose. That is why you are never truly trapped. You may feel trapped. You may believe you are trapped. But feelings are not final truths, and beliefs can be changed. The moment you understand this, you stop seeing yourself as someone trying to survive life and begin seeing yourself as someone participating in the creation of life. You stop giving yesterday the authority to determine tomorrow. You stop treating old stories as permanent identities. You stop bowing before appearances. Because appearances change, conditions change, people change. But the consciousness through which you experience life always remains the starting point. And that is why 5 seconds matter so much. Not because 5 seconds can magically erase every challenge. Not because 5 seconds remove the need for growth. But because 5 seconds are enough to remember what you have forgotten. 5 seconds are enough to return to yourself. 5 seconds are enough to interrupt fear before it becomes a prison. 5 seconds are enough to replace despair with possibility. 5 seconds are enough to say, I refuse to define myself by what I see right now. How many lives remain ordinary simply because people never pause long enough to choose differently? They react automatically. They repeat yesterday. They inherit fears that were never theirs. They allow circumstances to speak louder than faith. And little by little, they become servants of habits they never consciously selected. But you are no longer asleep to that pattern. Something inside you has awakened. You have begun to understand that your greatest responsibility is not to control the entire world. Your greatest responsibility is to become aware of what you repeatedly agree with within yourself. Because every agreement carries power. When you agree with hopelessness, you strengthen it. When you agree with limitation, you nourish it. When you agree with fear, you give it permission to remain. But when you agree with peace, peace begins to occupy your mind. When you agree with abundance, you stop living like a prisoner of lack. When you agree with love, you stop seeking validation from places incapable of giving it. And when you agree with your highest vision, something remarkable begins to unfold. You stop chasing life, and life begins responding to the person you are becoming. That response does not always arrive according to your schedule. Sometimes answers come unexpectedly. Sometimes doors open quietly. Sometimes blessings appear disguised as delays. Sometimes what feels like rejection becomes protection. Sometimes what you call waiting is actually preparation. And one day, you look back and realize that nothing was wasted. Not the tears, not the uncertainty, not the lonely seasons, not the moments when you questioned everything. Because even in those moments, life was shaping your understanding. Even in silence, something sacred was growing beneath the surface. And perhaps this is why gratitude possesses such incredible power. Gratitude reminds you that life is happening with you, not against you. Gratitude keeps your heart open while impatience tries to close it. Gratitude teaches you to honor the present instead of postponing joy until some future moment. Because joy was never meant to be a reward after perfection. Joy is part of the journey. Peace is part of the journey. Hope is part of the journey. And the greatest gift you can give yourself is not endless striving, but conscious living. Wake up and choose your thoughts. Walk through the day with intention. Guard your inner conversations. Treat yourself with compassion. Speak words that strengthen your spirit. Imagine beautiful possibilities. Trust that unseen things are working in ways you cannot yet understand. And whenever fear tries to return, whenever doubt whispers old stories, whenever circumstances appear louder than your faith, remember that you do not need an hour. You do not need permission. You do not need perfect conditions. You only need 5 seconds. 5 seconds to remember who you are. 5 seconds to return to gratitude, 5 seconds to refuse panic, 5 seconds to choose peace over fear, 5 seconds to stop identifying with the old version of yourself, 5 seconds to stand inwardly where your future already exists. Because lives are not changed by a single spectacular moment. They are changed by repeated moments of awareness. They are changed by small decisions that eventually become new identities. They are changed when ordinary people stop waiting for miracles outside themselves and begin recognizing the sacred power already present within. And maybe after hearing these words, nothing around you has changed. Maybe the same room surrounds you. Maybe the same responsibilities remain. Maybe the same challenges still exist. But perhaps something infinitely more important has changed. Perhaps you no longer see yourself the same way. Perhaps you no longer believe that your future is chained to your past. Perhaps you understand that every sunrise brings another opportunity, another decision, another 5 seconds. And perhaps those 5 seconds, repeated with faith, love, discipline, and unwavering awareness, are all that have ever stood between the life you have known and the life that has been quietly waiting for you to claim it.